All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are here with Amber Booth-McCoy, and she is a diversity specialist here with us at UAMS. And so we are glad to have her here. Just so we can get started, if you have any questions throughout our time with Amber, please go ahead and ask those questions in that chat box below. You can find your chat box by hovering over that taskbar at the bottom of your screen. What we're going to do now is we're going to just talk to Amber a little bit about diversity. So let's just start with something really simple. Amber, how do you define diversity?
I define diversity as the multiple dimensions that make up the holistic view of a person. So a lot of times that's, I guess, the primary would be gender or sexuality, things like that, but it includes everything from thinking styles to personality to spiritual beliefs to all of that.
Okay. So what does having a diverse organization, especially at UAMS, mean for everyone? So considering patients, employees, visitors, what does that mean?
So a diverse workforce is good for everyone, but diversity happens naturally. People are naturally not the same. So an inclusive workforce would be where employees or patients, all of that, are going to get the best outcomes possible in everything. If you're just thinking about teams, and a team where I'm able to bring my whole self. And that doesn't mean that everyone agrees with everything that everyone says, but there's a sense of belonging in inclusive teams. And so you are comfortable bringing different parts of yourself. And it could be everything from researchers trying to figure out multiple perspectives or different ways to look at that, because with inclusion comes intentionality, right? So it may be making sure that you have multiple voices at the table, multiple ethnicities, at the table, perspectives, all of that, to come up with the best solution. And it could be something as simple as a conversation that isn't about work, that because you feel comfortable sharing, like even some personal things that maybe sparks a different idea, right? That you and your team could work on, or even that next $1 million idea that you may have, but you wouldn't have had that if you didn't feel comfortable enough to share, in that moment. When we're talking about patients, a diverse and inclusive workforce, a lot of times we have to look at even the cultural implications of caring for a diverse population. And so it is important to have healthcare providers that represent the population they're trying to serve. So there are things about my culture, things about the way I operate and people in my community operate that may be different than yours. But if that is going to directly affect patient care, even something as simple as how we use a word, right, then it makes a difference to best patient outcomes, everything for the team. And in business, you just make more money with more diverse teams and when women are leading them.
Well, that, your point brings up me going back to your TED Talk that you did in February, talking about patients and just different cultures. And you shared a great story about a little girl who was getting her hair done. That was something that I didn't know that. I had no idea. Could you share that story with us?
Sure. I have a friend that works in the ED. And so she's an African-American female. She was coming out of a patient's room and she heard two of her white counterparts talking about the patient, which was a little Black girl who had come in with burns on her back. And they were trying to decide if they were going to call CPS. The parents had said that it was an accident, but they were just kind of concerned about, these burns. And so my friend asked if she could take a look at them, and she did. And so the little girl had braids. And a lot of times in the African-American community, when you get your hair braided, you get it dipped in very, very hot water to lock in the style. Thing is, after that, you sit like this, so that it doesn't touch you, but she's a little girl. And she obviously leaned forward, and then there were burns on her back. So my friend was able to come out and say, hey, listen, I'm pretty sure this is what happened here. I mean, you can see where the braids, touch the skin, that kind of thing. But if they weren't willing to listen to someone else's cultural experience, well then, those parents would be dealing with the Child Protective Services case for doing hair the way they normally do. I mean, on a Saturday, on a Sunday, but even when it comes to certain words, I was just talking with someone who recently, there was a word, so the person was, Spanish was their first language. And there was a word that was different in the English language and the Spanish language, but it sounds very much the same. Well, needless to say, because of this one word, this person ended up with a surgery, right, that they did not need to have. But it was because they did not understand, right, what was being told to them and all this other information, but that has to do with culture. So we're able to have diverse healthcare professionals and not just interpreters, but you know what I mean? Like if I know that down here in the South, we call pop pop or soda soda, or you know what I mean? Like, and I can say it the way you would best understand it. So it's not just about using the formal, you know, interpretation of words and things like that, but the way you would best receive that information.
Mm-hmm. Those are perfect examples of why it's so important to have diversity in our teams. Those are examples that, you know, I'm not really in a patient-centered care role, but that is something that I think is great examples that we should learn from. Do we have any questions right now, Lisa?
No questions so far.
Okay.
I'm anxiously awaiting.
Yes. So when it comes to our current situation that we're in regarding COVID-19, what role does diversity play in a situation like now?
So we have been going nonstop because now is the time when it is time to look at things with different lenses. And that's what the Division for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is supposed to do. We assist with being a thought partner when we're looking for solutions and making sure that we're getting information out equitably, right? So you and I are having this conversation in English, but we have an institution that has employees from almost 90 countries. So needless to say, there are many different languages spoken in UAMS, but even externally, when we're talking about the Arkansas population, whether it's Arabic, Vietnamese, Marshallese, Spanish, all of these different languages, communicating in just English, we're going to miss out, right, on people understanding everything that they need to understand about COVID and everything going on. So working with communications, right, to make sure that information is going out to where it needs to go, but not even that, making sure that I don't need to know the way every other culture needs to hear this information. I need to be able to bring people to the table that would best know how to communicate, right, that information to those communities specifically. So for instance, we're working on COVID, we're calling them COVID chats and facts, where we're sitting down and interviewing different healthcare professionals about different things. This last video we did was about myths, but we did myths in Arabic, Marshallese, Spanish, and English, right? Because culturally, right, what the myths are in each of those populations is very different. So you don't need to put the same standard message, right? Because equality is not what we're looking for. Equity is where we give what is needed to whom it is needed, right? So if there is not a large, overwhelming idea that putting lemon in your nose stops COVID in my community, doesn't mean that it's not in a different, community. We need to be able to make sure that we squash all of that, that everyone has the accurate information. And not just when it comes to that, but when we're talking about the new way that we are learning, right? And all of the new ways that we're doing our business meetings and things like that, how to make sure you're being inclusive during all of that. So we have departments asking questions about, the best way to structure meetings now, or how to go about doing their distributive learning or things like that, because they want to make sure that we have the chance to kind of reshape our entire cultural landscape right now. I think that's what's exciting to me. I know if there's nothing exciting about COVID, to me, it is whatever normal looks like after this, because we get to shape what that looks like completely. And that's exciting to me.
That is exciting. We are in a time of learning and transitioning. So it'll be interesting to see where all of that goes when all of this, goes back a little bit at a time. So I had a question that was emailed to me. What are some examples of actions or behaviors that are really more allusions to diversity? So what are some things that people do that they think are just that could be mistaken for diversity in the workplace?
Can be, I was just about to say, give me just 1 second.
No, you're good.
A lot of times there may be teams, right, that feel that because maybe they have a team with different ethnicities on it, okay, that there is diversity there. But if there are these different ethnicities, but maybe everyone has the same faith, right? Or everyone has the same idea, political beliefs or things like that, then there's not going to be a lot of diversity if you're trying to solve problems or if you're looking for solutions in different areas, right? When it comes to being thought partners. So I think a lot of times people look at just racial diversity and think that, that they are doing something. And while we do need to be intentional about making sure that we're making equitable hires and things like that, it could be just as simple as people trying to be diversity, like I said, is natural, but inclusion to me is, I guess, where we often need help. And that's not just putting up pictures of multi-ethnic people on websites, but there are also things that people do that don't hold much weight. Like everyone wants to write a diversity statement, and that's awesome, but there's no literature or even, survey feedback responded saying, you know what, that diversity statement I saw at this school really made a difference to how, they treated me there. That's not, really what happens. So I think that empty gestures like just having employee resource groups maybe that still don't feel connected, or just having diversity statements, or even thinking that just because you see racial diversity means that you are being diverse and or inclusive.
So what should a leader or a manager, what steps should a leader or manager take when an uncomfortable situation comes up that deals with an issue on diversity? So, for example, team members using stereotype language, racially charged language or statements, unfamiliar religious practices. What are some things that leaders should do?
So there's no one right answer to any of those questions because it's going to vary by setting. I think that if it is, let's say in a meeting, right, and something is said, I think addressing those things then, right, maybe it's someone, for instance, I was in a meeting recently and there was a male who kept cutting the women off every single time they spoke, right, and in that moment, one of the his counterparts in the room said, let's let her finish a thought, right? So he was an ally without having to, say a whole bunch of stuff or say, hey, stop interrupting her. It was more so just, aligning with what is right. I think that making sure that if it's the person, maybe it's the person who the slight happened to, hearing them out. Definitely making sure that you acknowledge your own lens. Like there are going to be things that may not seem like they were a big deal to me, right? But if it hurt someone, then definitely taking the time, of course. It seems like simple communication skills, but listening to that, getting both sides of, that communication or breakdown, and making sure that you extend what I call just grace, right? Let's extend the nicest possible, reason that someone would have said that. And then ask the person who was offended what they would like to see, like what is a resolution to you? And then make sure that those resolutions are equitable. If you did this in one situation, make sure that this is what happens in the next situation. So I think it's about leading with integrity, and everyone appreciates effort, like seriously. So it's more than just hearing, but if you are able to be an ally in that moment, then do that. And if it's going to take some investigation, and if it requires reprimand, then accountability and consequences are important if you're in leadership. It's not just, sweeping comments under the rug, because then that person doesn't feel empowered to share with you again, right? And so that person is constantly taking hits, or what I call mosquito bites, that, feel like micro inequities or microaggressions, and they're not going to bring their whole self. So again, the whole team is losing out if we don't address the things that need to be addressed when they need to be addressed.
Yeah. I just want to build on something you said, Amber, and with regards to like being a leader and how do you handle it and how how it's all different. It's very circumstantial, but at the same time, I think something that's important for leaders is to stay aware. So sometimes, you know, we don't even see it, or we ignore it, or it can happen right in front of us and we don't even realize that that is what is happening. Mm-hmm. But staying mindful of that, like your story about the being in the meeting where the women were getting interrupted, and someone has to actually be mindful, like, hey, and be able to recognize that that's happening. Mm-hmm. Because so many times it just happens and we don't even, like, we're oblivious, I think, to a lot of things that are really, as you say, inequitable.
And sometimes I think people don't want to rock the boat.
Yeah.
But you got to rock the boat. Like, definitely as a leader, not being passive, and you have to take a stance. And so that's one of the things I really appreciate about Chancellor Patterson, because there are things like, for instance, I also assist with the Rainbow Health Alliance, and that's a student group here on campus focused on LGBT issues in the community, you know, on campus and off. And we have wanted a banner for a very long time. And we're in the South, and that can be controversial to put UAMS next to the rainbow, you know, flag and such. Well, when we got a new vice chancellor and a new chancellor, I thought this is a great time for me to ask again. And our chancellor said, why don't we have one? And then I explained why we didn't have one. And he said, well, we have to decide the type of institution that we are. That's what leadership looks like. It says, this may be a risk, but we're going to do what's right. And then I'll take whatever hits are necessary, but we have to decide who we are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That is a wonderful example of what true leadership through diversity really looks like. So I loved how you also talked about with this question of what can happen to that person when people don't speak up. And what happens, you know, going back to the meeting where, you know, the woman was getting cut off, and how at that point it's just those tiny mosquito bites that just keep coming back. And then therefore they just completely check out. They don't even bring their ideas to the table. They don't even share anymore. And so that's definitely not what we want to see happen here at our organization. So another question, what would you say is the most difficult part of implementing diversity and inclusion into an organization? Like, you know, where could a team even start? Like, what have you found that is most difficult?
About implementing it at the organizational level?
Well, either organizational, departmental level.
So I think either way, attitude reflects leadership. Period. Starting at the head and having a clear vision of what you mean, and when you say diversity and inclusion, and like what you want those outcomes to be. Even if we're talking about an institution like UAMS, and we're saying we're going to be the healthiest state in Arkansas by 2029. Okay, well, we have all been here, many of us in Arkansas, trying to figure this out. In order to actually make those things happen and move the needle, it's going to require very, very inclusive solutions. So we're going to have to make sure that there are more people at the table. So first, having a goal, a vision, and then always asking not who's at the table, but who's not at the table that should be at the table. And then there has to be accountability, right? So if I say, for instance, if I say that I want my team, oh, you know what, I really love what Fayetteville did. So University of Fayetteville, University of Arkansas Fayetteville wanted their departments to be more diverse, right? They wanted to recruit and hire more diverse faculty. And they were focused on the primary dimensions, you know, gender, sex, you know, ethnicity, that kind of stuff. And they allowed departments that hired diverse faculty and staff to have money placed back in their budget. So putting your money where your mouth is, right? Your resources will align with your priorities. A lot of times there are institutions and they want to just do training, and one-off trainings is not going to change the culture of an institution. So where to start, like I said, starts with leadership, acknowledging your outcomes and where you want to go, but that culture is what you are trying to create, not just these ideals, but you want a sense of belonging, and you want to know what that looks like for everyone. So it starts by listening, right? What I think inclusion is, or what I think makes UAMS strong or special or inclusive may be different than what you think. But as a leader, being able to hear all of that, see how I can incorporate, those ideas best I can, and then, move forward, and making sure that you're continually checking in and making sure that you have measurable touch points. Like if we have a goal at UAMS, we want to make sure that our grants, right, that we have diversity in grant distribution and things like that. Well, we have to make sure that we put structures in place in order to do that, because we have been wanting these things forever. But if we're not going to put in mentoring programs, if we're not going to teach, professors how to go from associate to full, if we're not going to actually put mechanisms in place for success, then those things don't really matter. So making sure that you start with the head, making sure those resources align with those priorities, making sure that it is measurable, and not thinking about diversity like it's some disparate idea and it just means this one thing, and putting diversity in a box, because it's so vast that it has, to do with everything. Anything you can think of, you get better outcomes when it comes to thinking about it multiple ways.
Perfect. So, in your opinion, Amber, what is UAMS's #1 opportunity when it comes to diversity?
I think that we're currently moving in the right direction, right? Like I said, I really appreciate our new chancellor and our new vice chancellor and the things that they've implemented. I think that we have a ways to go when it comes to being equitable, right? We're talking about the state that we're in and the demographic breakdown of our state, right? When it comes to just race. In a perfect world, your organization parodies, the population at large. If the state says that, we have 17% Blacks or African Americans, then our workforce population would, parody that. The thing is, we look good on paper, but oftentimes when I see people of color at UAMS, they are either at the front desk or they are on the ground floor or in a position that is maybe what we consider our service positions, So I think that we have an opportunity when it comes to mid-level management, right? Yes, we have diversity on in the vice chancellors, right? As far as the chancellors, the board and things go, and then even further down, but that mid-level, I don't see much diversity there. And I definitely think that that's an opportunity for UAMS. And even when it comes to the recruitment and retention of diverse faculty, and even when it comes to our students. So I just think we have a ways to go as far as diversity and being inclusive, because the culture is, when you change the culture, you don't have to do a bunch of recruiting. People want to come to that place. If we're talking about students, if you have minority students that have had a great experience, they're going to share that with their network. If you have patients, right, that have been treated a certain way, they're going to share that, be it good or bad, with their network. So I think we have the opportunity to make sure that our experiences are equitable, whether it is an employee or a patient. And that's just going to take some intentionality on our part and not looking at numbers overall. Oh, when it comes to patient satisfaction, we have a 4 out of 5. Have we broken that down by patient experience? You know what I mean? Like when we're looking at it by demographics, what does that number look like? Is it a 4 because, this group says a 4, but this group is saying a 1, right? And then when it comes to even the decisions in mid-level management, I think sometimes there may be policies or things that are sent out and there may not be intentional, right? To be exclusive or things like that, but there may be unintended consequences. For instance, maybe a couple of years ago, there was a policy that came out about the dress code and about colored hair and things like that, right? Well, who's to say what is a professional color, right? If we're not going to be specific, because maybe you don't like blonde hair on me specifically. So is that unprofessional, right? Because you don't like my blonde wig that I placed on my head today. So I think that even when it comes to the fact that there has to be legislation in some states right now called the crown, I don't know, the crown legislation, so that like I can wear my hair the way it naturally grows out of my head. Like just, there has to be legislation for that. That there shouldn't need to be legislation for me to be able to wear my braids or my dreads. But if we're only looking at things through one lens and through one cultural lens, then ask everyone else to fit in there, that's not inclusion, that's assimilation. And assimilation is essentially a form of oppression.
Yeah, that's powerful. I didn't know that. I mean, you are our specialist on diversity, and I didn't know that had even been a thing, that you couldn't have different colored hair. I've only been at UAMS for about 3 years. So that is new information to me. Right now we have about 4 minutes left. So again, I want to encourage you all to, if you have any questions that you want to ask, go ahead and ask them in our group chat, and I'll make sure that we'll get to them. But before we end, I want to ask you, Amber, just one last question. And so tell me about what resources are available to employees and students to learn more about diversity.
On campus, we have the Academy for Inclusive Excellence, which is just a cadre of courses that we have with multiple facilitators on everything from race, ethnicity, microaggressions, implicit bias, intentional inclusivity in the classroom. We have courses on recruiting diverse faculty, all of that. Externally, there are lots of institutions that I like. Honestly, Ohio State, the Kiwan Institute, they are a leading thought partner when it comes to the D&I space. And so they have books and things that you can download. We are also going to be launching our library as well. And so UAMS employees will be able to just come and choose a topic of their liking and, you know, be able to see the videos and things that we have as well. So we're working on uploading that as well. And then you always have our office, and you are welcome to email me. I am the person that gets those questions that you don't want to ask anyone else. And so I'm happy to get those. I don't have all the answers, but I'm happy to share what I do know or put you in touch with somebody that I think can give you a better answer.
Great, great. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take all of this information that you've given us, Amber, and we're going to put it in a one-page overview for all of the individuals that weren't able to make it today. And we're going to post this recording online and within my campus. But it doesn't look like we have any questions that have come through chat. And so I know sometimes diversity can be...
Because I answered them all. I'm just so good.
You did. You
I
answered
all the
every one of them. You got it. You got it.
Even the hard ones, so.
Yes. So we do know that, you know, sometimes diversity topics can be personal. And so if you have felt like you did not want to ask in the group chat openly a question, please feel free to reach out to me, send that question to me. I can send it on to Amber, or, you know, if it's okay with Amber, like you said, just reach out to Amber directly. So we do encourage that. I want to thank you again, Amber, for visiting with us today. And thank you so much for sharing this information. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Amber.
Y'all have a good day.